Hey everybody, I'm Ellie Mae, joined back with Shannon. She is back this week. Yay, Shannon. And today's question, yes, yay. Today's question is, do you support Trump attacking Canada over trade? So of course there's been some drama around the G7 summit that we talked about last week. I think I was talking about that with Kwaku last week, or Brian maybe. I can't remember, but there was drama going into that with Macron and Trudeau and Trump exchanging fiery tweets. But now it's not just tweets, it seems to be actual action about tariffs. So after Trudeau left the G7, he announced that he's going to impose equivalent tariffs on steel. A quote from him said, "I don't want to hurt American workers, but my job is to stand up for Canadian workers, Canadian interests, and I will do that without flinching," which is kind of a Canada first sounding quote there, which is funny. But Trump responded by tweet. Let's see. He said, "Fair trade is now to be called fool trade if it is not reciprocal. According to a Canada release, they make almost $100 billion in trade with U.S. Guess they were bragging and got caught. Minimum is $17 billion. Tax dairy from us at 270%. Then Justin acts hurt when called out." There are more tweets than just that, though. But we'll get into those in a few minutes. So, Shannon, what does this all mean? Are we in a fiery trade war with Canada now?
I feel like we have to address the question that I know everyone is thinking about, which is Justin Trudeau the sexiest world leader right now? And I think the answer is yes. So, first of all, I am personally hurt that Trump is going after my bae, Justin Trudeau, who is a liberal icon and also extremely attractive. So yeah, that would be that was my, honestly, that was a little bit of my first reaction was like, Justin Trudeau, like that Trudeau. But
that's funny.
Yes, anyway, there are a few pictures of him that are just like,
yeah,
really excellent.
When he dressed up as Clark Kent and Superman, I should have put that on the broadcast, but he has the glasses on, he's like pulling open his shirt to show the Superman emblem for Halloween. That was funny. He does dress up a lot though, and he's kind of gotten some fire for that. In certain nations, people have gotten a little upset with some of that stuff, but also people are like, well, no, he's just embracing the culture. So yeah, he is definitely standing up to Trump with this, which, he's like, Canadians are polite, we're kind, but we're not going to be pushed around. So obviously Trump is upset. And I guess, is the left sort of saying that Trump is sort of doing this as a way to look stronger in North Korea?
Well, so Trump's aide actually said that, Larry Kudlow.
OMG. Okay.
He was like, we can't, I forget the exact quote, I can look it up, but he basically said, as we're going into North Korea, Trump is not going to let himself be, attacked, and we are not going to look weak going into these negotiations. So I think that is definitely, I'm sure, obviously that's part of the calculus, right? These two things are days away. Trump is in Singapore right now. Yeah, I think from the left, there's a couple things. One is, there's really nothing new here, which is why it's a little surprising that there's so much vitriol between Trump and Trudeau at the moment, because Trump announced tariffs against Canada a little while ago, and Canada announced that in retaliation, they were also possibly going to levy tariffs. So what they're arguing about, didn't just happen the last couple of days. It actually happened, I think months ago, even like a month or two ago. Mm-hmm. So I think there is definitely some political posturing here. It seems like from Trump's angle, I do think North Korea, and from what his aide said, I do think North Korea is a component of this argument. This is my biggest beef. I think this is emblematic of one of my biggest beefs with Trump, which is something like global trade and the trade relationship between two countries is a complicated thing. So if a country, we buy goods from other countries, they buy goods from us, we have trade restrictions, other countries have trade restrictions. economics is actually relatively difficult, like not relatively, it is difficult. And to know exactly what would be best for one country's economy, what would be best overall, it's really complicated. And it bugs me that Trump reduces it down to these super like idiot simple sentences where it's like, it's, you know, this trade deficit and like he's taxing dairy farmers, the workers of America are being hurt. It's so much more complicated than you can fit into a 240 word tweet or character tweet or whatever. So that really bugs me because I think I know myself, like I know enough about economics and trade to know how much I don't know. Like it's very complicated. And so it bugs me to have all these people rallying behind these extremely simplistic statements that I think do not actually address what are, if anything, the real problems. And I think, like also we've talked about with tariffs before, you know, I'm not necessarily against tariffs or maybe quotas, but I think Trump is targeting these industries that I don't think are the future of American industry. So, you know, steel and aluminum, that's like actually a relatively small amount of jobs that affects, or like coal. I just don't see, or farmers, like how many Americans are farmers? Like actually a very small percentage. And we already have so many protections policies in place to help our farmers. If anything, I think we should be reducing the amount of protections we have to make it more competitive. So yeah, that's what bugs me about this. I will say that I'm not an expert on this, so I think it's complicated. And I think that the barbs that they're both, and like you mentioned, Trudeau had this very sort of Canada first message. I think when you devolve into these sort of bite-sized tweets messages about things like economic policy, I just am so mistrustful that you're actually saying something that's truthful or that's smart.
Yeah. Like, for instance, he said, sorry, we cannot let our friends or enemies take advantage of us on trade anymore. We must put the American worker first. That was one of his tweets that was retweeted a lot. I have a couple more here. I want to get to a comment. One, David said he is not attacking anyone. He is simply trying to make the trade playing field equal for all players. Do you have any idea what you're talking about? Look at the trade numbers before bashing, and remember, nobody has ever got North Korea to the discussion table. Okay. I think he was referring to just our question, not attacking either one of the hosts, but he was just talking to our question about our question. Well, he is attacking Trudeau with his words, to be fair. He called him meek, and I mean, that's not, to me, that's not a bad word, but in the way he used it, I think he meant it to be bad.
I think that's an insult.
Yeah, exactly. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau of Canada acted so meek and mild during our G7 meetings, only to give a news conference after I left, saying the U.S. tariffs were kind of insulting, and he will not be punished or pushed around. Very dishonest and weak. Our tariffs are in response to his of 270% on dairy. So I did look into some of the dairy accusations. Bloomberg said, so they asked the question, does Canada really charge 270 on milk? And Bloomberg said, on some dairy imports, yes, Canada essentially allows two avenues for dairy imports, those within quota and surplus stuff. It is the latter where tariffs spike because Canada's whole system is built to avoid a surplus, hence its name, supply management. And then they asked, so is Trump right on tariffs? And Bloomberg, the source Bloomberg said yes and no. Yes, Canada has high milk tariffs beyond the allowed quotas with an average duty of 218.5% on dairy, but on most other products, the country is roughly in line. And then another thing they asked was, do U.S. dairy farmers sell to Canada? And they said yes, big time. U.S. producers who also benefit from subsidies and tariffs exported about $227 million in dairy goods to Canada last year. So there is some truth to it, but also, like what you're saying, things are so complicated. Their system is different than ours, and there's just so many different things to consider. And I would like to have a breakdown by an economist who thoroughly understood all of this and wasn't biased and just was like, okay, look, this is fair, this is not fair, because I feel like 270 for 270%, say, that doesn't necessarily mean it's fair, because if you have different amount of goods or things like that, not saying that that's what they're doing, but you can't just be like, okay, well, you do one thing, we're going to do the exact same thing to you. You can't do that because both countries they offer different things. So it's just different. which is why it is so complicated. John says to our question, yes, he supports Trump. Let's see, there was a lot of no's in the beginning, especially. I don't want to put up the comments that are name calling to Trump or Trudeau because it's just not helpful to a conversation. So Aaron says no. Keith says no. Oh my gosh, there's so many insults.
Trump wants us to buy products from Russia, not Canada.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, and speaking of, he wants Putin back in the G7, which someone commented to me on Twitter. I think they said, why would you have Putin back in? G7 is about the strongest economies in the world. They were suggesting India, I think, should be put in instead of Putin. So there are some definite interesting conversations around that. And I asked Kwaku last week, I was like, does this suggest that there was collusion because he wants him back in? And I think, I mean, his point of view is pretty much, well, yeah, everything points to collusion. So it wasn't really an answer on that necessarily. And I mean, do you think, because you don't really think there was collusion, so do you think that was pointing to collusion because he wants Putin back in?
I mean, I just don't, in some ways, give Trump enough credit. But yeah, I don't think Trump and Putin were colluding to throw the election and there's some master plan. Like, do I think Trump is a puppet of Russia and, Putin has been grooming him for years and interfered? No, I just don't believe that.
Yeah. Grooming for years. Oh, I did not ever see conspiracies that deep, but I would love to read them. That's funny. There was this picture that kind of went viral of Merkel and Trump. And it's so funny, though, because there was a picture taken a second later from this. So this looks like Trump's being defiant and she's standing up to him. It looks very high tension. But a second later, they're smiling. It's so bizarre what a short second can do with the media and how they present things. It's really amazing.
Exactly. I know. Yeah. Comment from Scott. Hi, Scott. The American workers will be hurt in the long run. Steel and aluminum and 40% of our oil are the building blocks of all manufacturing in America.
I'm really want to find that comment, but I can't. Wait, what? Say it again.
The American workers will be hurt in the long run. Steel and aluminum and 40% of our oil are the building blocks of all manufacturing in America. Yeah, I mean, so I believe in free trade. I would like to see a world where there is just a complete, supply and demand, free market. I believe in the free market. I believe in capitalism. So to me, free trade is a good thing. Globalization is a good thing. It lifts all boats and it is a positive outcome and a goal that we should be working towards. I understand that's not the reality of the world right now. I think there are also some interesting considerations about the idea of trade. I mean, you mentioned sort of the America First policy, if Trudeau's being Canada first. There is a question, which is you look at a country like China. China only cares about China. So their policy is everything they are working towards. That is all just for the Chinese people and for Chinese industry. That is all they care about. I think there is, since World War II, basically, maybe even earlier, but there has been this sense sort of the U.S. being the leader of the free world. And so there's an idea that the U.S. is not just focused on what is good for its citizens, but what's focused on what's good for the world's citizens. And specifically Europe and Canada have always been very, very close allies of us. So this is not to say that the U.S. should take a hit to our industry or our jobs or opportunities so that other countries can benefit, but the idea that we might look at the larger picture or the long-term goals in our trade policies and how we deal with these countries. So an example, which Trump I think also tweeted about, was how much the U.S. pays to NATO versus other European countries. And I think I understand people who criticize this, but I think you have to be aware of the concept of the U.S. Taking up some of the mantle of, being the protector of the free world and whether you think that is good or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that does make sense. So there was one other thing, kind of piggybacking on you talking about supporting free trade and everything, which same. There was a quote from Bloomberg again. Some economists argue that it's government intervention in a free market, speaking about tariffs, However, others argue that the protection is warranted if it achieved a desirous result. So there are different takes with economists on tariffs, and I am assuming most of these economists believe in capitalism. So it's always interesting to hear. To me, to be an economist is a little bit like 1 + 1 = 2, but it does take into account a lot of cultural things and a lot of different things, really. But it's so interesting when economists can see things so differently. I find that very interesting. Because it just seems like something that is sort of black and white a little bit, to an extent, of course. What works, what doesn't, okay, but it's just interesting. But yeah, so I don't know if we have a lot of comments on this. Thanks guys so much for commenting. We try to get to them all. Sometimes they come in so fast, it's hard to keep up with, and we actually really like that. Let's see. Barbara says,
oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Barbara says, yes, but he just used them as an example. He needed to make a point. Interesting. I don't think we should be making an example out of our allies, so I hope that's not what he was doing. Summit should be televised so everyone can see who is lying. That's
interesting.
I like that comment the best so far, because I think we'd all benefit from that.
There's a comment from Carl who says, we actually have a trade surplus with Canada when you take all goods and services into account. Trump and his economic advisors are killing us. And I think that speaks to, there is, when Trump is singling out things like dairy prices, even that simple example, as you pointed out with the Bloomberg background, even that simple example has more nuance, right? Because there's a quota, and then above the quota, there's taxes on the surplus. But if you're thinking about the entire interplay and exchange of goods and services between one country and another, I think that is just very complex, and it's not necessarily clear exactly how those interact with each other. Like I said, I support free trade. I think that is what we need to be. Should be our goal for all countries. But I also understand some protectionist policies. Like, for example, I understand the national security reason of we should have some food production in our own country so that we can, feed. Should, some war or something erupt so that we can feed our citizens. I understand that. Another thing for me, like especially working in tech and thinking about how jobs are being taken away and changing, and I would love to see some, maybe if we had protectionist policies geared towards some more tech-focused and future-looking jobs, like things around manufacturing computer chips and skills that right now a lot of are being outsourced to a lot of countries around the world. I mean, China is a big one here. So I'm not against, on principle, protectionist trade policies. Just two things. I don't think Trump is focusing on the right things, but even more than that, I think he is focusing on things that are easily marketable to the American people. And I think that's not always, and this is not just Trump and trade, this is so many things. I think that's not always where we should be focusing, right? Like overhauling our education system, that's like a very complex thing, but it really needs to happen. There are so many kids who have terrible education in America and teachers who are underpaid. But it's easier to say like, oh, MS-13 gangs are like raping you in your sleep than it is to like overhaul our immigration system, which is so complicated, and there's just a lot of different voices with different opinions and trying to, get a consensus and push something through our dysfunctional Congress. So I think that is one of the biggest things that bugs me about Trump is just, it feels like he is so focused on the messaging that often you are not able to have a clear marketing or PR message for a lot of the changes that need to happen because they're complicated and it's uncertain what the outcome is going to be.
Yeah, that does make sense. Sharon said, he is trying to bring back fair trade. We've been cheated for years, sold out by Obama and Bush. So that I didn't want to post the comment because then it gets kind of ugly after that. But the point is a lot of people who voted for Trump had a problem with Republicans and Democrats, which is interesting because she's calling out Bush as well, which obviously a ton of conservatives call him out all the time. But to kind of wrap things up, I just want to say I hope things are going well in Singapore. That is pretty historic, and I'm sure we will be talking about that tomorrow. I don't know when they're meeting, like in the next, I know they're both there, There's a lot of
9 p.m. Eastern tonight.
Oh my gosh. Well, prayers for that situation because that's going to be interesting. Yeah, there's going to be so much to talk about regarding that tomorrow. I have a feeling.
Yeah, I'm excited. Yeah, I talked to my sister about it because she her work is Asia-U.S. relations and the political situation in Asia. And so I was asking her about it, and she was saying that she is optimistic, and
wow.
she said it is certainly they're trying a new approach. So change can be good. Change can be bad. It can also be good. So the fact that the change, there's reason for optimism there. So we shall see. I think the other thing too is, and even Mike Pompeo or specifically Pompeo was really, I think, urging some caution with people thinking like, oh, they're going to solve everything in this one 10-hour meeting or even less time. But instead, this is probably more like the meet and greet and the kickoff that then allows our diplomats to work with North Korea and probably South Korea and China to actually hammer out what this looks like. And it could be a years-long process to get somewhere. So just keeping that in mind.
Yes, absolutely. We have to sort of think of it as what it is. It's a huge thing with very powerful nations that things can't just be solved in 2 hours. Well, that's it for us today, I think, unless you have any last thoughts, Shannon.
No, that's it.
Yay. Well, we will see you tomorrow. Happy Monday, everybody. We hope you have a great rest of your night. See you tomorrow.